Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. We're just going to sit for a second and let everybody log in. As you know, you're here for In Real Life is the New Black, how Eventbrite elevated the human connection. This is going to be a really cool presentation today. We're going to go over some neat takeaways, and we are touching on some incredibly important human aspects of the onboarding process, of hiring, of candidate retention, the whole box of dice. So let's just let everybody log in. We have William Tincup and Elizabeth Pierce here with us today. Hey guys.
Hey.
You're not muted. You can talk away. Putting them on the spot for fun.
Well, Elizabeth, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's another beautiful day in San Francisco.
It's also Thursday, Elizabeth, and the best thing about Thursday is it's almost Friday.
Exactly. I love it.
So I can hear you fine, I think. Can you hear me okay? Sound
Yep.
relatively
Perfectly good.
Okay, good.
You guys sound wonderful to me. And if anyone out there in the audience has any struggle hearing anyone or seeing anything, let us know so we can address. All right, well, everybody's logging in. People are piling in. So here we go. Let's go over the housekeeping. You are in listen only mode. This means that you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. That's cool though. This is an interactive webinar. Please don't be shy. Use the questions bar in your side panel to ask questions. We will hold and relay everything we possibly can over to Elizabeth and William throughout the webinar and at the end. Share. We're live. Just use the RDaily hashtag to share on Twitter. Just because we're started doesn't mean people can't join. So let everybody know we're here. And we're recording. You'll receive a copy of the slide deck and a link to this video after the webinar. So please keep an eye on your inbox. Make sure we're whitelisted so you get those. And if you have any trouble getting the materials, just email ashley@recruitingdaily.com and I'll make sure you receive them. Today is brought to you by InBorder. I love that line. Today is brought to you by InBorder. This is an awesome platform. They are the world's first and only experience-driven onboarding platform. They transform employee onboarding to an ongoing, engaging, rich, and consistent experience for new hires and their managers, providing all the tools necessary for organizations to maximize employee engagement for today's digital generation. They enable HR teams to design beautiful, engaging digital content that delivers automatically along bespoke timelines straight to mobile. They have some of the world's largest and most innovative employers as customers: McDonald's, Eventbrite, Banana Republic, Compass, Verizon, oh my gosh, Qantas, Gucci. That's only a few of them. So definitely check them out. And that email you receive will have some amazing educational information for you to download. And you already heard his voice. Oops, look, we're going over to the InBorder website. You have already heard him on here, but we have William with us today. He is the president of Recruiting Daily. He was proudly banned from Twitter for 4 whole months. This is like a record here, and has been blessed with intellectual sarcasm. You have so many bullet lists on your on your CV, William. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
You know, been in the biz for long enough to know where some of the bodies are buried, and I'm really excited about talking and hearing Elizabeth's story. And if you want to know more about me, just type my name into Google, and you'll find a lot of good things, and some of the bad things and stuff like that. So.
Thank you, William. And we have Elizabeth Pierce with us today, Global Director of Learning and Development at Eventbrite. She is our pro litigation tech for 6 years, and she has been in talent development for over 18 years. You can see all of those awesome logos there. You have been all over. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, Elizabeth?
Sure. Yeah, I've been in learning development, talent development for over 18 years. I got started in litigation tech doing mock trials for like Philip Morris, Alcoa, and DuPont, and then was anticipating taking a break and dabbling in learning and development for like maybe 6 months, and ended up staying 18 years. So my heart sits in in tech, and you can see that from some of the spaces that I've worked in since I moved to San Francisco 12 years ago. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, we are so excited to do this with you today. We've been waiting for this day for months now. So I am going to hand this over to you and William, and thank you again, everyone, for being here. I hope you enjoy. Ask your questions. We'll relay. Here we go. This is Eventbrite. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, just talking through this, like our mission statement at Eventbrite is bringing the world together through live experiences, which is probably the coolest mission statement for a talent development, learning development individual, which just is super amazing to me. I mean, really, the true thing is people in terms of engagement and talent development. So what's the coolest thing to do? Like bring people together through the live experiences, which actually creates memories and actually engages folks to like do their best work and bring their best self to the office and beyond, which is pretty amazing. So today I think we're just going to talk about a couple things that were not just Eventbrite, but like other spaces that I've worked in the past in terms of how we brought like really cool live experiences together that actually made an impact on business. And I believe we're going to start with some technology insights. So Ashley, I think we're good to go to the next one.
All righty, there we are.
Cool. I mean, William, please jump in whenever. I'm just going to start with like the squirrel and shiny technology, if that's cool with you.
You bet.
Cool. So a lot of questions, a lot of times I get questions at conferences around like, what platforms do you use? How do you use certain things? Like, what do you do? And keeping in the same vein of like making sure that an employee experience is still really solid and as much in life as you possibly can get, or as many engaging experiences that you can get an employee to work through. I always make the recommendation of like, yeah, there's like amazing pieces of technology all over the place, and a lot of times it's sort of, oh, look at that piece, oh, look at that. Squirrel. And so it's very similar to like all these shiny pieces of technology and how can I actually like utilize them. And one of the first things I've always suggested is like, don't think about the technology in terms of like, it's shiny, it's pretty, like AI or VR. Like, what are you actually going to do with it is all of my bigger recommendations. I mean, Onboarder for us is a great example. We use Onboarder and we really wanted to have a great experience for the employees. Like the moment that they signed their offer letter, we set off this amazing experience through Onboarder that actually brings people together all the way through the process and gets us to day one, where it's an in real life experience for the employee to come into a particular office and just experience what our culture's like, how we do things, like what are we passionate about, what's our mission statement, what are our vision statements, where can an employee go, we call them Brightlings, where can Brightlings go to have to find resources and engage. And one of the cool things is that we've actually embedded, they've taken the in real life sort of scenario and tried to make it engaging even prior to day one with like video welcomes from our CEO, a video welcome from their manager, whoever it might be, just so they get excited about coming to work and excited about starting with us at Eventbrite. And then when they hit us in day one, it's just like they're super excited. They're stoked to be here. They're like, when can I start? What's going on? I want to meet my team. I want to meet my buddy. So we try to make it like super exciting going all the way through. So in terms of tech, like just making sure that it's not just for shiny purposes, but it really actually has a business reason and is engaging the employee.
So Elizabeth, first, right off the bat, let's do two things. Make sure the audience knows to ask questions. This is so much of these things is we don't want them to be a one-way as best we can. It's like Elizabeth and I are at a Starbucks talking and there's a bunch of people around. Really, the questions kind of make these things. So please ask questions. Secondly, these things wouldn't happen without vendor sponsorship. So Onboarder, want to thank them for allowing this conversation to happen. Starting with number one, I love that you start with technology is important, but you've got to get some other things in order. And I usually tend to refer to that as process or people, or maybe a blend of the two. So so that folks that are listening, do you kind of look down at your process or look down at what needs to be done? And some people call it micro experiences or moments of engagement or journeys, or there's a lot of different phraseology for these things. But do you look at those things first and kind of map out what you want done and then think about technology?
Absolutely, absolutely. So if we map out a process or we look at like where we can actually make a bigger impact on certain
Mm,
things, then I actually link in the technology. So I'm like, this is what I want to do. Is there a piece of technology out there that allows me to do it or already does it? And then also if I come across something where it's like, oh, I'm not finding the technology, is there another piece of technology that I can actually hack to make it do something that I want it to? So there's kind of two folds around that.
So you want to know what's great about this is you want to know the outcome. I wanted to do this, and then you go to the market or marketplace, I guess, if we want to use that term, and then you look around to see if you can find something that fits it, or you have to hack another tool, or get somebody to build it for you or whatever. But you have a very clear vision for what the outcome is.
Absolutely, 100%.
Do y'all use the words that I like, experience or moments or journey? What terms do you use for the kind of the IRL when people have that kind of that moment together? I'm saying moment, but when they have that moment together, what do y'all have an internal term that y'all use for that?
Um, I mean, we don't necessarily have a term for it. It's more around like just, you know, your experience. It's like having experiences like
Perfect.
from our standpoint, we have, creators that create events and it goes onto our platform. And we call those creators and events that actually occur. And they're like the moments that bring people together. So I guess that's the description, but we do use terms like engagement
Hmm.
internally, things of that sort. We definitely use the terminology that's in the industry.
Right, 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 right. Okay, good, good. All right, tell us about number two.
Hiring, business impact. So a lot of things are really tied to if you actually look at when somebody starts on day one, that's awesome. They have a great experience. Then they go into day two. If it's not a continuation of day one in terms of global onboarding, and they're usually going into their role to start learning their job, right? And at that point, it's really truly important to understand, like, okay, great, they're in their job, we've hired them, they've met the requirements. If we're like 2 weeks in and we're like, wow, this was not the right fit, we need to go back to the hiring and say like, hey, because we didn't hire the right person for this particular role, now it's having an impact on the business. Because in my head, I think about the amount of money that was spent trying to hire this person, not only from a recruiting standpoint, time away for someone's desk to interview them, et cetera. But I also look at now they're here and they've spent 2 weeks sitting in a training class. So that's money that we've spent to train these people in terms of the trainer, the materials. This person, if they were sort of disengaged or they weren't really up to speed in what was happening, they may have been disrupting the class. And then we have to offboard them, which actually takes time away from like HR and all these other things. So I really look at hiring as like, how do you get the best person in the seat at the right time so that they can be successful going forward?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. It was a very similar mindset around price, quality, and speed, right? But I've
Mm-hmm.
got a couple of kind of experience-related questions. One is, what's your personal take on job descriptions as kind of an experience for candidates? What do they need to, what do they need to see, hear, feel, um, all the senses, I guess. Um, what is that experience that you think is kind of optimal for candidates when they?
For Oh, okay. So I would say, it starts with like the hiring manager working really closely with recruiting to make sure that, and the HR as well, making sure that there's an accurate job description. It's not
Mhm.
like, yay, come work for us. We have dogs in our office. Like, okay, that's great, but Like there is going to be work to be done. So I look at like what's the best description for the role. Like what do we really expect this person to do, whether that's like in the first 90 days or the first year. Like what are the things that we really expect that person to do? And then also working really close with HR, recruiting, hiring manager in terms of, what are the competencies that this person needs? So what are the skill sets in terms of communication or resiliency? Like what are the things that this job actually really needs to be able to harness and do on a pretty daily basis, to make sure that we're actually interviewing to that particular aspect too? Is that what you're kind of going for?
I was exactly. And what's interesting is with your background in training, there's how we get the job description right. It's kind of a collaboration between 4 different disparate groups of people: sourcers, hiring managers, recruiters, and HR, who at least historically haven't done a great job of communicating together about anything, much less about something as benign as a job description. And that's usually where we get it wrong. We don't do a great
Yeah.
job of like creating, this is the job. It's a combination of these things. These are the nice to haves. These are the must haves, if you will. And casting that out as a very real, job description, so that when the person, goes through the process and gets hired, that they can do the job that was advertised, the job that the description, creates. They can do that job, maybe not another job. And that's that cliff between what we put in job descriptions and job ads and the reality of the job. And
Yeah, I think business impact though, like don't just go and try to hire somebody to hire somebody. Like, oh, I need another person. It's like, well, why do you need the other person? Which should define the job description and competencies, right?
That's right. And competencies, everyone it's like recycling. Everyone talks about their competency model. Very few people actually operate a business based on a competency model. So, like everyone says they recycle, but I'm pretty sure that everyone doesn't recycle. But it's similar. If there's competencies that this person have, and one of the worst case scenarios is when you're trying to replace a person, like Jason, the office manager, who had accounting experience, events experience, SEO experience, and EA or executive assistant experience, and also was a creative phenomenon. Okay, now are we trying to replace Jason? Do we draft a job description that has all of those things in it? Or to your point, what's the business impact? What is the basic?
Yep.
What's the business impact? Let's draw that. Let's create that. Let's kind of forget Jason for a moment. Let's go get this person that will create this impact.
Yeah, exactly. And it starts with like, what's the business strategy for like the next 6 months or year or whatever it is, and then work backwards from there. So what do we want to achieve, and then look at like the role, and then maybe look at Jason at the end.
Yeah. Do you think we rush? I mean, you're in the valley, so things are just crazy, and I get it. But do you think we rush to try to hire without giving all of what you and I just talked about full thought?
Yeah, there was a company that I worked for that grew from 1 employee to 17,000 in under 7 years. I'm sure you can probably guess, which is a great example of that. Like, wow, why would you and the fact that it grew that quickly is amazing. But then when you look at it, were the right people in the right roles? Were they sharing information in the right way? Were they actually working at their best? So I would just kind of consider that. Are you just going to throw people at a problem and then hope they figure it out? Or are you going to be very strategic around, we need to hire people with these 3 skill sets because we need to meet this strategic goal for the business in the next 6 months?
Right. So last question before you get to number 3. And again, the audience, please do us the honor and ask questions as we say things that you either agree with or patently disagree with. give me an idea of how long you think onboarding should, in an optimal situation, how long do you think onboarding should take?
Well, it depends on your definition of onboarding versus orientation. I mean, there's like different descriptions for things. So there's onboarding in terms of somebody actually like signs their offer letter. You could consider
Right.
that sort of the starting point to run.
Right.
Or
Right.
you could say onboarding is, I would probably just say that, like that's where it really starts. Someone signed their offer letter and they're off and running. I would say orientation happens within that. That might be like your day one in the office scenario. And then onboarding continues throughout. So I would actually say that you could actually consider, like, especially in the state of California, that onboarding continues all the way through the second year if you include the harassment training that's required every 2 years.
Right.
So that's like making an extreme example. But I would say that when you go through your onboarding, it's really about like listening, learning, engaging, asking questions, being prepared to do your best work with the job that you were hired to do. And that usually takes within the first 90 days would be sort of my experience. So you're listening first 30, learning the first 30, 60 is when you're actually like performing at a medium level, like you're performing at like the base rate that's required for the learning and you're still sort of making mistakes. 90, you should be like really into your job. You should be really steady. And then within the first 6 months, you should actually be performing your job at a level that is like maybe slightly above or right at the level that's a good experience, because during those first 6 months, you're actually learning the culture too. So I may be like a super expert on something, but I'm not a super expert on something when I walked into Eventbrite. So I had to learn the culture there. So I would say 90 days is a good rule of thumb, but the first year is really where 6 months and years where you're really learning a lot about the culture and how it works.
I love that model, and I'm on your page. I share a similar belief pattern. Do you share that, or you believe it's important to share that with candidates? Like that's the expectation that you're looking for, that you'd like to see out of them?
I do believe we actually talk about it. We talk through it. So even with like one of our divisions, like you really truly have 30 days of like, immersion training, and like you're really like into like your training, what you're doing. You need to learn this. We're very collaborative. We're very transparent. We try very hard to make sure that people are receiving feedback in the moment as we're going through the process of their learning and their onboarding process. So we try to be really open around it. I've worked for other companies where it's like you have to meet this goal within 10 days of start date. You have to meet this goal within like 20 days of start date. And it's like really hardcore. And it's like, I wonder what the turnover rate is in companies that are very much like, you need to like memorize this and do it right. And I wonder if that's like what their turnover rate is for that particular space. And are people really truly engaged at that point?
So as a person that understands learning and development, training and development better than the average person out there, do you give the person, the employee at this point, the option to work on strengths and make their strengths stronger? Or is it about working on their weaknesses and making their weaknesses, average, better, etc.? Like, do you give them the option, or do you kind of already have a plan for them to shore up one or the other? Like, do you have a philosophy behind how you interact with employees around training?
In training in general, not onboarding, right? Is that what you're asking?
Right.
Okay. So I would say that for an employee, my personal opinion is that employees should really focus on like learning their job if they've just started. If they are further into their position, look at what are my strengths and what are other things I can actually contribute to the business. What are the things I'm interested in? Is there career development opportunities that I can stretch to that I really want to, that can help the company or help me help with certain aspects of the company. And then also look at, maybe when you look at a strength, you also are looking at what are some some things that I may not be really great at doing, but I want to get better at. So for instance, there's a wonderful person that works with me, and she is pretty much an intermediate speaker in a particular language. And she actually asked if she could do a stretch goal of, expanding her knowledge on that particular language, and so that she could communicate better with some of the offices that speak that language. And it was fully supportive of that. Absolutely, we'll invest in you. Please go off and learn this. And one of the first things that she's doing is, like, she recognized she was not as strong as she could be to hold conversations in the language. And so she's doing like little homework things, like she's taking a current e-learning that's in English and she's translating it to that particular language. And then she's working with a couple of people in that particular region saying, hey, can you help me like spot check this and like help me grow and learn and make sure that I'm providing the right information so that it actually helps them learn about the process. So it's pretty awesome. I mean, you should be able to identify your weaknesses, but also like elevate your strengths at the same time and take those weaknesses and make it more of a strength going forward. Does that help?
Oh, it does. And just one kind of a tail-on question with that. Do you think, as an individual, do you think you can identify, or the person can identify their strengths? Like, can I, and if I'm honest, which I am rarely honest, let's if I'm honest with myself, do I really know what my strengths are or my weaknesses are? Or do we need to use third-party testing and validation and all that type stuff?
I think you can just ask for feedback. I mean, one of the most,
Yeah.
one of the most brutal changes in my career occurred. So I was going to go to law school. This is a short story. I was going to go to law school. And my dad sat me down and said, like, you're 22 years old. You should go be a paralegal for a year, see if you like it. And I was 6 months into being a paralegal, and the partner I was looking for, she pulled me into her office and she's like, you are not good at this job. I was like, what? She's like, you're not good at this job.
Let me take your dream, and now I'm going to kill your dream. I'm going to stomp on your dream.
And I was like, are you saying I'm not a good paralegal and I should be a lawyer? Or are you saying I'm just not good at this? Like,
you should never go into a law firm, ever. Even if you're going to deliver a package, just avoid law firms. Never go in one ever again. Oh my God.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm not sure if I should start crying or if I should be mad, or like, I'm not sure what feeling I should have at this point. Yes. Because 2 seconds later, she says, you're really good at understanding this database and all this technology that's like sitting in a courtroom that none of us understand. And I was like, okay, what else should I know? And so she basically like assigned me to work on a case with like DuPont that they were going to start using. This was an O.J. Simpson trial was happening. And she's like, you need to go figure out how to use this stuff, and you seem to understand it better than any of us here. So I went and started doing that, and I loved it. But it was like she saw that I had this, like, the weakness was like I actually kind of hated looking for pleadings and like doing letters and things, but I really loved sitting in front of the computer and teaching people how to actually utilize the technology that we had in the firm. So sometimes it just takes somebody to say, like, hey, this is what I'm observing. What do you think?
This is so genius. I know the audience is getting I mean, first of all, it's just great to hear that story, but also understand that we've all had that happen to us.
Yeah.
At one point in our life, we think that the line is this direction, and all of a sudden life teaches us, no, the line is a different direction. Let me give a hack for the audience, something to think about in your process. So you learn things in sourcing and in recruiting and hiring. And so one of the things I would advise you is a collaborative process is to ask questions of candidates. What do you feel like some of your strengths are? What do you think some of your weaknesses are? Most important, and Elizabeth has said this word like 5 times, is interest. Ask them about their interest. And what I would like to, and why this is a hack, is ask them about their interests outside of work. Okay, so it's cigar rolling and scotch tasting and hand gliding and learning Spanish, whatever. All of this stuff that's outside of work. Because what you're going to find is if you get to the onboarding phase and you've collected that data, you can then validate, hey, you know, you told us a while back that you're really into hang gliding, which is fascinating. So is that true? A, so let's validate that. B, let's actually find a way to, you know, put something in front of your interests. So this is where learning and development, training and development, because most of what happens both in onboarding and in training is compliance driven. It's the sexual harassment policy, it's the internet policy, it's this policy, it's that policy. It's all of these things that we have to check off. But rarely do we ask the individual, as the candidate, now employee, hey, what would you like to learn? Like
Mhm.
there's work learning, things that would make you better at your job. And that's fantastic. Put some great stuff around it. First of all, find out what it is, and then put some great content behind it and process behind it, etc. Okay, that's great. But I would say at this day and age, especially with the generations of millennials and Gen Z, I would also put personal interest at least at the same pace or even above work interest, so that you engage them not just about work, but you engage them on the things that they care about. So first of all, Elizabeth, I'll give you a moment to respond to that. Do you see any of that in your work or in your in your organization at all?
And Eventbrite, 100%. So we have folks who are actually creators here, that work here. So we may have somebody who sits in finance who actually like runs a particular like creator event on the side because that's what they're passionate about. I mean, I think that's pretty amazing. We also really support our creators in terms of like, hey, let's all go out and support this particular creator because they're doing something cool. There's a woman who works in San Francisco and she teaches Zumba like once a week, and like that's what she does and that's what she loves to do. And so we celebrate like anyone who's a brightling that like it wants to create or engage, and we really look for like, what are you personally passionate about? What do you love to do? And we try to celebrate that throughout the whole company. So not just externally with our creators, but like people who are internal. And we also bring in creators for like panels and tell us more about what you do and how you do it and like what are you passionate about. I mean, those are actually the really cool things that I think just bring that in real life experience. So not only just, you know, what are you passionate and excited about, but also like how do we celebrate that within the office, which is great and super fun.
Well, I think, you know, this is how we hack engagement. This is also how we hack the retention of our top talent. Is we talk to them on a level about, hey, there's some work, you know, the work, and there's going to be training and learning and development and all kinds of. We're going to surround you with great people around the work. But you're not just a being that does work. You know, you're a being that has passions, just like you said, and interest. You know what? We want to support those things, the whole you, if you will. We want to support
Mm-hmm.
those things as well. And so I think if more companies actually took interest in their employees' interest and passions, there probably wouldn't be as much turnover,
Yeah.
or at least, the regrettable turnover. There probably wouldn't be as much of that because the company's showing its interest. Like we care about the whole you. Anyhow, it took us way off topic. Tell us
No, I
about
think that's great. I think that's great because it's not about like going out and like going to a bar. It's about like, oh, can we
right.
celebrate you as a person?
Well, and this also gets into a lot of the conversations around differences, right? Like
Hmm.
belonging in a company and having a sense of belonging. If you have a sense of belonging, you really feel that. I think that means. I mean, I know it means something. But
Yeah.
it's getting the company over the hump of like, listen, this person wants to learn about cigar rolling or scotch tasting. I'm talking about my own habits, of course. Um, so you know what? It might not help them at work, but they're going to learn that at work about those things, which will make them want to work and feel like the company cares enough about my passions. I care about the company and its passions. And so I think
Yeah.
there's a real cool relationship between the two. That we got to get companies, CFOs and CEOs in particular, we got to get them to see that light. I think
Yeah,
that's
like if you
wonderful.
wanted to, if you worked at Eventbrite and you wanted to like show people how to properly taste whiskey, like you could come in and do that. Or like, how do you roll a cigar properly? Like you could come, you should be like, I want to do this. And, you know, we could set it up and like anyone who wants to come, they could come. Like, I mean, internally. So it was just like, if you're passionate about something, you want to share it with the company, you totally are welcome to do that.
That's I love that. I love that. So anyhow, we tell us about number three, 'cause I know people are going to
Uh,
have questions.
so aligning with the hiring managers. I mean, we already kind of talked about this in terms of like the hiring standpoint and kind of what's expected, but also making sure the hiring managers are like super aware. So I'm going to give a really small plug for LinkedIn in terms of they did a video that's called like, we call it, when we talk to managers, we call it Don't Be That Hiring Manager. But it's this little video. It's like Landon and Brandon. And it talks about these twins who are actually the same person and same actor. But it talks about like, the different experiences of the two individuals. And it is the funniest video ever because every time I've ever shown it to a hiring manager, like one of them, like someone will say like, either that's me, or they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I don't do that. But my manager did that when I showed up. Like, so it's really interesting to sort of watch the aha moments of hiring managers just from this video. But the video is great, but also making sure that the managers like have a story and understand like where their new hires are coming from. So that goes back to that personal experience and like just getting to know your person, like the person that's coming in that you've hired, not just like I've met them 3 times, I already know them, but like, hey, what's going to be the best way to get them off on the right foot, and then continue to engage with them.
I think it's what I love about that is I think it's as as fast as you can get to real,
Yeah.
real talk, real like, hey, listen, where do you thrive? Where do you fail? Let's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
let's just get to that. And for me, it's if I fail when I try to be somebody else. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can look back through my life and look at the moments of just mass failure, and it's when I tried to be somebody else. And so, talking to a hiring manager about that, and having real talk about the job, so the hiring manager says, instead of it all being a positive story about the job, I think hiring managers and recruiters need to talk more about the realities of the job. Like, listen, here's the deal. We work, these hours, and this is the culture, and these are the values, and these aren't just words on the wall or anything like that. This is actually how we work. This is going to be the expectation. If this doesn't fit you, then the job is not going to fit you. So,
Right.
like, let's talk. Let's talk. Let's both try to attract them and reject them at the same time. And I think that
Yeah.
that's that. How fast can we get to real with a candidate on both sides, and them with us? That two-way street. How fast can they get to real with us?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then not to jump to 5, but I think it's also understanding like if somebody, you know, wasn't a good fit, like what were the reasons? Like why were they not a good fit? Why did they leave? Like what was
Mhm.
happening? Like did we not understand them or understand like where they are, and we do not give them support? Do we not like understand where they were coming from and not realize that up front they were probably not a good fit?
Yeah, and I think that's the strategy of um, hire slow, fire fast. It's kind of more or less a 90s strategy of hiring. I think if we know that we've made a mistake, and again,
Yep.
no blame, sourcers, recruiters, hiring managers, HR, candidate. Let's just take the blame and put it off to the side and just go, a mistake has been made. This person, this job, not going to work. Is there another place where this person could possibly really thrive? Okay, yes,
Mm-hmm.
no. If no, then we've got to actually have a heart to heart. We need to have that discussion your boss had with you about, the legal profession. We've got to have that discussion. We've got to have it's kind of a fierce conversation. We've got to have that conversation, and then we need to be graceful, and in allowing them to do whatever's next. And we romance them on the front end, and we do such a great job of romancing them into the job and into the brand, into the company, and into the role, and then we kind of forget about romance. And when things get rocky, or maybe we find out they're not as great, or they're just not great, the fit didn't match up like we thought it would, then we're not as graceful.
Yeah, and I think that what you talked about was the legal feedback that I got. It's like what I loved about that feedback with her was that she did it really fast. She ripped the Band-Aid off. She's like, this is what's going on. But then she also was like, but this is where I'm seeing you as being really strong, that no one else has that skill set. Like, that was really inspiring to me. She's like, I'm going to dash your hopes, but then I'm going to bring you up because I know that you're really excited about this. And I was. I mean, I did it for 6 years. I loved it. It was great.
What's funny is there's an old communication strategy. It's called bubble. And it's where you say something positive to the person. Oh, you look great today. I really like your shoes. Really like your suit, etc. You say something positive, and then you hit them in the jaw with something negative. Like, I'm going to now just take, one of your arteries out, and then you come back with something positive.
Oh, the sandwich.
This is sandwich.
The sandwich.
Right? So there's a method. There's a method to this madness, and I bet if you went back to that conversation, she probably said something nice to you at first.
Which I don't recall at all.
Which you don't recall at all.
No, she killed that.
She hammered you, but she came back to the good stuff. The good stuff. Oh, by the way, you're top 1% over here at this other thing. This is where you will thrive. That's fantastic. Tell us, you've got number 4 and employee life cycle. I actually want to get your thoughts as to the different moments along that life cycle where you think things are important, especially as it relates to person, and doing things and creating kind of moments with people as they go through that life cycle.
Yeah, I would think the first moment would be, hey, you're talking to your best friend and you're like, I love working at Eventbrite. And I know that you're not happy with your job, the current job. Would you consider working at Eventbrite? We may not have a job opening, but if something comes along, or if I hear something, would you be interested? So you have that, I consider the recommendation to apply as part of the life cycle. So actually, if you have a good experience for the employee and they're really excited about their job and what they're doing and their culture and their work, they're going to recommend somebody else to join them in what they're doing, which is amazing to me. So I always consider that the first step. And then somebody applies for the job. So what's their experience when they actually apply for the job? Does the recruiter reach out? Do they talk to them? All the basic things. Then once they sign the offer letter, what's the experience then? Do I sign the offer letter and I start in 2 weeks and I don't hear anything from anybody? What kind of experience is that? Am I going to make a second guess as to my decision to join? And then there's day one where you start, how is the excitement rate of that particular aspect? What's the real life experience of I've joined, I'm excited, this is so much fun. It's almost parallels a festival in terms of recommending a musician that you might want to hear, buying a ticket, going to the event. So it's all these things that actually occur. And then I would push over to then your first 90 days where it's you're still super excited, you're still in honeymoon phase, you're learning a lot, you're excited to continue and really strive and really contribute to the business and do your best work. And then usually around year 1 is where it's okay, now we need to start talking about my career development. Where do I want to go? Where do I want to see sort of things develop? Where are the things I want to actually really stretch to? And where's my next role? Do I want to consider my next role is I want to be a senior manager, I want to be a supervisor, or I want to be a director, and what are the skills I need to develop to get to that next role? And then from there on, from 1 to whatever time frame you might have within a company, depending on the longevity of however long people stay. Then there's the career development, career growth that moves from maybe internal development in terms of like going to a class for like new people managers if you're new to being a people manager, to maybe you're doing external coaching or whatever it might be, to things that might be, once you get to a certain level, how do you continue to engage individuals at like a director level? Like, do you actually encourage them to go and speak at an event, which is what happened to me. My manager was like, you need to go start talking at events. I'm like, I don't know. And I did, and I loved it. And so like, you need to go talk to them. You need to actually learn what other directors are doing. You need to understand more about our industry. You need to become a subject matter expert on like X, Y, and Z. And it seems like, oh, you really like technology. How can we utilize that love? And then going through and say like, if I'm to the point where the company can't give me more around where I want to go and how I want to develop, is it time for me to say goodbye? And not in a negative way, but say goodbye in a way that, you know, I'm going to move to another space and learn more over there, but I'm never going to forget you. And maybe I'll boomerang back at a later date, but I'm still going to recommend others to join the company, even though I've left. So making sure that that offboarding process is really positive for somebody who's especially voluntarily leaving, because you may get a boomerang in a couple of years, and they're going to bring even more things back to the company that would be a higher business impact, but also they're going to recommend people and start them back on that cycle again.
The last part is the one that really touches me, is that's just as much a part of your employer brand as the part on the front side. And all too often we think about employer brand and that candidate experience, and we focus a lot of our energy, a lot of what's written, a lot of what's talked about at conferences is really focused on the front end, of how do people interact with our brand. Well, not as it's getting better. There's more discussions now than there ever has been about the employee experience, and so all those moments that you listed through the employee experience, those are getting talked about more. And your last piece, which I believe is a very, very important piece as it relates to employer brand, is boomerangs. It's really, even if you don't hire them, even if it doesn't come up, even if it isn't someone that you will or ever will work with again, there's still a grace. There's still a, hey, we worked together. We did, we loved you. You loved us. You're going on to your next best adventure. Whether or not it was our choice or your choice, you're going on to your next best adventure. We want to keep in touch with you, and we want to stay in your lives as best we can. Like, that's just grace. I mean, it's corporate grace, but it's grace, right?
But also, I still mentor 3 people from former companies. Like, I'm still involved with them. Like, I will never, unless they tell me that for me to mention them anymore. Like, I'm still super passionate about mentoring those 3 people because I've seen them grow exponentially, and it's just, I'm so excited to continue to mentoring them, and it just fills my heart, and I'm just like super happy to do it. But also, it does help their brand too, I guess. But I didn't even think about it that way.
So I want to throw some terms at you and see how you respond to them. So you've said celebrations. So I want to talk a little bit about celebrations, but traditions and ceremonies, which are kind of cultural anthropology kind of terms that we would use, right? So traditions in the sense of when someone has a birthday, this is what we do. And there's a tradition, and it could be a ceremony as well, or when someone gets promoted, we ring a bell, we stop down, we do this bit. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was visiting a company in Austin who's in the space, and on the first day of work, it's an open environment, probably 80 employees. The new employee has to stand up in front of everybody, introduce themselves, and tell the company something that they've never told anybody about them. So they have to tell them a secret to the entire company, and that's a tradition. That's one of their traditions that they have, and everyone from CEO, from board, everyone has had to do the same thing. And
Eee.
so it's just one of those things that, yeah, I know, right? So I'm thinking like all my secrets. Oh, good God. But what do you think about, because you've used the word celebrations before, and celebrations could be mixed into this, but what do you think about traditions and ceremonies?
I think you need to be careful with them. I think that you need to include like diversity, inclusion, and belonging and stuff like that into those. So I just cringe when you were saying that, because what if you have like a super introverted engineer who
Hmm.
started and they're just like, uh, that's not in my comfort zone.
Right, right,
Like
right.
that's hard for them. What if you decide to celebrate birthdays and it's you bring in a cake for the December birthdays, right? And everyone's expected to eat a piece of cake, but yet someone might be like, yeah, well, I'm diabetic and I really can't eat that cake, but they're shamed to eating a piece of cake, so it's like really being hyper aware of like, what's something that doesn't put somebody in jeopardy of being uncomfortable um, or just like shy or like completely like starts a disengagement of that life cycle. Looking at things like what could actually like help them or be celebratory but not damaging. So for instance, at Eventbrite, like, I mean, most of the Valley folks, people have stickers on their laptops, like to the horror of like every like IT person who has to scrape them off. Um, it's so bad. But and I'm guilty of doing it as myself. But like they give you a sticker, you walk in the door, walk into the Eventbrite, like here's a backpack, here's some swag, here's a sticker for your laptop, put it where you want to. Like it's just like, yay, that's awesome. And then we're starting to roll out like, hey, you just had a Brightversary, like Brightversary #1. Here's a sticker for #1. I'm not giving too much away because it hasn't really. It's going to roll out like next week. But it's like we are celebrating like Pride Week, and it's like, oh hey, here's a sticker that's like celebrates Pride. So like we're doing things that like putting a sticker is not damaging beyond the IT people, but it's celebrating, and it's also like, yeah, I've hit my 5th one. I've got 5 stickers rolling across my laptop. I'm super excited. There's also, during All Hands, we celebrate every Brightversary for that particular month. So everyone who's had like one anniversary, we throw up all of their pictures together in a group. So we don't single any person out,
Mm,
which is great, but you're still celebrating it. And then people are like, oh my gosh, happy anniversary. I had no idea that you just hit your 2nd. Congratulations. So celebrations can happen in a way that's not terrifying for like someone who might be like, I'm very personal. This is where I want to stay. But then also like still celebrating and achieving the engagement that you want. Does
right.
that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense, and I think that you've brought up some wonderful points that it's got to make sense for everybody. Like it
Yeah.
can't just make sense for one group of people within the company. We've got to think of, and this is 2019. This is actually what we should be thinking about right now. We should be thinking about
Mhm.
it's a whole company. What we do impacts everybody. So let's make sure that our values and mission, vision, and the way that we interact with everyone, it doesn't exclude. And I think that was one of the best parts is like, okay, you've got an engineer and he or she gets in front of the audience and they shut down because that's just not their sweet spot.
Yeah.
That's not their bit. Well, we shouldn't put anybody in that position. I mean,
No.
that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't increase engagement, and it's embarrassing. So I think that thought of making sure, like, we're all starting to think. I think, thankfully, as Americans, we're all starting to think a little bit bigger and wider about how it might impact whatever decisions that we make might impact all of the people in our organization, which I think is, I
Hmm.
mean, thankfully we got to this place, right? I do
Right.
I do have a question that came in around stay interviews, and so exit interviews.
Stay.
Yeah, yeah. So the concept. of exit interview is, okay, at the end we're parting ways. Again, whether or not it's our choice, your choice, we're parting ways, but we're going to get kind of some really brutal feedback on why and what didn't work, and see what we can do to fix that, and all that stuff. Some companies do stay interviews, and the way it's explained to me on text is essentially what they do is once a quarter they ask, hey, what are we doing to keep you? Like, what are we doing? It's kind of similar to engagement, but it's a stay interview. And the concept, it's been around for a while. It's not a new concept, but so many HR people are accustomed to the exit interviewing being a part of the exit checklist. Like, 30 years ago, we had to, we got to get your key, got to get your credit card, you got to turn in your laptop, and there's this checklist of things to do. And then we interviewed people on their way out, and they told us things about, I don't like Sally, and, Tim's a serial philanderer. They told us things that we, might or might not need to know, and might not or not be true. And stay interviews are the opposite. They're still working for you, and you're asking them,
Right.
why do you stay? What do you conceptually? What do you think about stay interviews?
I think that's pretty good. I wonder. So the interview part is what I'm interested in, because you've got engagement surveys, which will tell you, like, I see myself working at Eventbrite in 2 years' time, or whatever. Like, you can nail those questions and then give you yes or no. The stay interview would be super interesting, just because, number one, you're able to, like, see, you're able to actively listen to them in terms of body language, and you're maybe able to ask more if you're getting questions, et cetera, which I think is actually pretty brilliant. I wonder, I think at Eventbrite, we'd still get good information out of that, which would be awesome. I was amazed when I experienced the engagement survey for the first time at Eventbrite, and so my team handles that, and we were supposed to look at all the comments and read through all the comments to make sure that, like, everything, we got the right consensus of the feelings of the particular questions. And we had, like, so I've never seen so many comments. So, like, people at Eventbrite are very vocal on their, like, what they think and how they feel, which I think is phenomenal, because I've done other engagement surveys where there may be, like, 10 comments for, like, a company of, like, 1,000. And I'm like, why is that happening? So I think the interview thing is really fascinating. Instead of just sending a survey, actually saying, like, hey, this pocket of, like, 10 people across these particular departments, let's pull them in and say, like, let's talk about why you stay. I mean, you don't have to do, like, one-on-one, but I think maybe you could do, like, a focus group around why you stay. That would be super interesting.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So last thing, and like 60 minutes has flown by. We still got some interesting questions, but last thing I got to ask you, that is a question from one of our audience members. And by the way, thank you, Melissa, for the stay interview. How do you know? Because this is IRL is the new black, right? So how do you know when you've gotten it right? Like, there's a diminished return, right? We all know the law of diminished return, and where there's this, with everything, there's this moment in which it's not effective, or it diminishes, right? So for you and the experiences that you're thinking about creating and that you create for all the folks that you work with, how do you know when you get it right? Like, is there a sense? Is there a feeling? Is there something that you just know and it clicks? Like, the people tell you? Like, how do you know when you get it right?
There's a couple different ways of looking at it. So the engagement survey will tell you when you get certain things right. Like, people are like, I'm engaged, I'm excited, that sort of thing. Like, you'll get that scenario. There's another way in terms of sort of doing, like, A/B testing of a particular, like, if you're going to do a particular training that's live, and then you're not getting as many people, but you're getting a lot of people online. You're like, okay, so live actually means we need to do that training like online and not in person, like face to face. Like it's more online is a better scenario. So you see things like attendance dropping off, or people are not signing up for a particular class, or folks are giving you like direct feedback. I mean, we do feedback surveys quite a bit just to get information. So there are those sort of things that occur. You can also test bound some things in terms of what you're doing. Like our goal was to actually have this business impact for a particular like training or session or whatever we were doing. Did this have the impact that we needed? We might not be able to measure it for a full month to see what it was, but if we're going to go and like say, okay, this worked, this didn't work, this is what we're going to do differently going forward. So there's always a learning curve that'll occur, but hopefully you've vetted out like what you're trying to achieve prior to actually releasing it or doing it.
I could talk to you all day long. I really could. You are amazing, and thank you for. I know you're busy and crazy busy, but thanks for carving out time for us and the audience, and kind of raising our intellect and getting us to think about new things. But I know Ashley's going to kill us if we keep talking. So
No, I have not had the heart to butt in. This has been a brilliant conversation, and I'm so glad I was muted because I've been laughing through half of it. So I was like, it's just great.
well,
But
Elizabeth is very easy to talk to, so that's why.
this is
Oh, well,
wonderful.
thanks. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well,
Oh,
Ashley,
thank you.
close us out. You've got the.
Okay. I definitely will. Thank you so much. We really appreciate this, Elizabeth. Like I said, incredibly enlightening. I have personally learned tons since I've been here. So listening to you has been wonderful. If anyone has questions that you did not get an answer to, feel free to shoot those over to me and we will do our best to get those relayed. Thank you so, so much for being here. Thank you, William. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So
Thank you.
let's just
Everybody,
thank each other over and over again.
that's what we're going to do. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. See you soon.